Listen, do you hear that? It's the sound of silence in a place that was never meant to be quiet. This isn't the peaceful silence of the mountains. This is an anxious quiet. It's the sound of a diner on Main Street with the chairs stacked on the tables at noon. It's the sound of a rail yard where the rumble of coal cars has been replaced by the whisper of the wind through rusting steel. It's the sound of a town that no longer hears the shift bell. That sound once marked the rhythm of life here in the hollows of West Virginia, in the coal fields of Kentucky and Pennsylvania. It was the sound of purpose, the sound of a nation being built. Now that sound is a memory. What's left is a silence that feels heavier than any mountain. This isn't just an economic downturn. This is a funeral for a way of life. The headlines you read in 2025 might tell you a different story. They might point to official numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and say that West Virginia's unemployment rate is low, hovering around just 4%. A success story, they might call it. But that number is an illusion. It's a statistical lie that hides a much deeper, more painful truth. Because the real story isn't in who is counted as unemployed. It's in who has stopped counting altogether. The devastating truth is that West Virginia has the lowest labor force participation rate in the entire nation, just over 55%. Let that sink in. Across the country, the average is nearly 63%. That gap, that 7-point difference, represents tens of thousands of people. Fathers, sons, mothers, and daughters who are no longer even looking for a job. They are not unemployed. They are erased. They have vanished from the spreadsheets that politicians hold up as proof of progress. This is a statistical portrait of despair. It's the data of a people who have given up. And so, when Washington talks about a bright new future, when they promise billions of dollars for a great green transition, when they speak of retraining programs and new industries rising from the ashes of the old, why does it ring so hollow here? Why does a promise of reinvention feel so much like a final act of betrayal? Because Washington is trying to solve the wrong problem. They are offering a financial solution to a community that is suffering from a spiritual crisis. This isn't a story about the death of an industry. This is the story of a nation losing its soul. And the quiet that hangs over these hills is only the beginning. Decoding the spiritual collapse. To understand the depth of this crisis, you have to understand what King Coal truly was. To the outside world, it was a commodity, a number on an energy report, a dirty word in a climate debate. But here in Appalachia, coal wasn't a job. It was faith. It was the bedrock of an entire culture, a code of honor passed down through generations. It was more than a way to make a living. It was a way to belong. For over a century, the identity of this region was forged in the darkness, thousands of feet underground. It was built on a unique set of values that the modern world has largely forgotten. First, there was grit, the pride of doing one of the most dangerous jobs on earth. Every day, these men went to war with the mountain. They walked into the earth armed with little more than steel and sweat to extract the energy that kept the lights on for America. That wasn't just labor. That was a display of courage. It was a physical testament to their toughness, their resilience, their refusal to break. Then there was community. These weren't just towns. They were clans. Everything revolved around the mine. The shift bell dictated when you ate, when you slept, when you prayed. The local high school football team, the church picnics, the corner store, all of it was woven into the fabric of the mine's rhythm. Your neighbor wasn't just the man who lived next door. He was the man who had your back in the darkness when the roof creaked and the earth groaned. That bond, forged in shared risk, created a level of trust that is almost impossible to find anywhere else in modern America. And finally, there was sacrifice. Every family in coal country knew the risks. They knew about black lung. They knew about collapses. They accepted that their sacrifice, the trading of their health for a steady paycheck, was part of a larger pact. They were powering the nation. They were building the cities. They were fueling the wars. Their sacrifice had meaning. It was an act of patriotism, performed in grime and dust, far from the halls of power. Grit, community, sacrifice. These weren't just words. They were the pillars of a man's identity. They were the source of his pride. So when the mine closes, it doesn't just take away a paycheck, it takes away everything. It takes away the very language they use to define themselves. What happens to a man defined by grit when there is no longer a mountain to fight? What happens to a community built on shared risk when the risk is gone and all that's left is shared poverty? What happens to a sacrifice when the nation no longer seems to value it? The result is a spiritual collapse, a hollowing out of purpose that no government check can ever hope to fill. And the evidence of this collapse is not found in the unemployment numbers. It's found in the quiet desperation that now haunts these valleys. It's found in the data of what experts call deaths of despair. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, year after year, West Virginia and Kentucky have the highest rates of drug overdose deaths in the United States. This isn't a crime wave. It's a public health catastrophe born from hopelessness. It's a generation of men, raised to be providers and protectors, now finding their only escape in a needle or a pill. It is the final tragic symptom of a society that has lost its reason to be. The statistics on child poverty tell the same story. Data from Feeding America in 2024 shows that 1 in 6 children in Appalachia faces hunger. In states like West Virginia, food insecurity is among the highest in the nation. Imagine that. The sons and daughters of the men who fueled the richest country on earth are now going to school hungry. The pride of generations is replaced by the quiet shame of a father who can no longer provide. This is the human failure behind the economic one. And it's in this context of profound loss that we must listen again to the words of that one miner. We kept the lights on for America. Now no one remembers we exist. That sentence is not a complaint. It is a confession. It is the sound of a man admitting that his life's work, his sacrifice, his very identity has been rendered invisible. The pain of being poor is brutal, but the pain of being invisible is unbearable. So what is Washington's solution to this deep spiritual wound? What is their answer to this crisis of identity? A technical plan? A green promise? The broken promise? CCUs and hydrogen? From the polished halls of the Department of Energy, the solution seems perfectly logical. It's a plan born from spreadsheets and climate models. It's a promise of a new clean energy economy. It's called the green transition, and it comes with a staggering price tag. In 2024, the Department of Energy officially announced the Appalachian Regional Hydrogen Hub, or ARCH-2. It's a massive $9.25 billion project designed to transform West Virginia and the surrounding region into a powerhouse of clean hydrogen energy. Alongside this are billions more in federal tax credits for technologies like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, or CCUS. The promise is that these technologies will create thousands of new jobs. They will revitalize the region. They will build a bridge from the black past to the green horizon. On paper, it is a grand act of reinvention. But down on the ground, in the hollows of Logan County and the towns of Pike County, it feels less like reinvention and more like erasure. To understand why, you have to understand the profound cultural gap between the promise and the people it's meant for. The promise asks a man to trade hard hats for circuit boards. To the politician in Washington, this phrase sounds like progress. It sounds like opportunity. But to a 55-year-old third-generation coal miner, it can sound like an insult. Think about what you are truly asking. You are asking a man whose entire sense of self-worth is tied to his physical strength, his mastery of heavy machinery, his courage in the face of danger. You are asking him to sit in a community college classroom and learn to wire a wind turbine or monitor a solar field. You are asking him to exchange a culture of grit for a culture of technology that feels alien to him. It's not just a change of skills. It's a perceived demotion of status. He was once King Coal, a symbol of American industrial might. Now he's being asked to become an entry-level trainee in a clean industry he doesn't understand and frankly doesn't trust. This isn't about a resistance to change. It's about a deep, earned skepticism. These communities have heard promises before. They were told that globalization would lift all boats. It just sank theirs first. They believe these new green jobs are a political illusion, temporary, non-union, and a poor substitute for the stable, high-paying careers the mines once offered. And the tragic part is, their skepticism is largely justified. Let's look at the reality of these so-called solutions. Consider carbon capture. It's a technology designed to capture carbon dioxide emissions from power plants before they enter the atmosphere. For years, it has been touted as a lifeline for fossil fuels. But the history of large-scale CCUS projects is a history of failure. The Kemper project in Mississippi, for example, was a multi-billion-dollar disaster that was largely abandoned after years of cost overruns. Reports from independent watchdogs in 2025 consistently show that the technology is incredibly expensive, energy-intensive, and has yet to prove itself as a viable, long-term climate solution. For many in Appalachia, CCUS looks less like a bridge to the future and more like a taxpayer-funded subsidy to keep dying power plants on life support for a few more years. It's seen as a corporate bailout, not a community investment. Then there is the great hope of green hydrogen, embodied by the $9 billion ARC-2 project. The promise is immense: thousands of construction jobs to build the new facilities, followed by high-tech, permanent jobs to run them. But critical analysis from groups like the Ohio River Valley Institute, or ORVI, paints a very different picture. Their 2024 and 2025 reports raise a devastating red flag. Yes, projects like ARCH2 will create thousands of jobs during the initial construction phase, jobs that will last for maybe 1 to 3 years. But once the facilities are built, ORVI warns that they will only support a few hundred permanent operational jobs. And these jobs are highly technical, requiring engineering degrees and specialized skills that the local displaced mining workforce simply does not have. The fear is that the construction jobs will go to out-of-state contractors and the permanent jobs will go to outside professionals. The local community will be left with all of the environmental risks of the new infrastructure and almost none of the long-term economic benefits. The green promise, when examined up close, starts to look like a familiar pattern. It looks like a system where the profits flow to large corporations and the political credit flows to Washington, while the people of Appalachia are once again treated as collateral damage. It's a plan that addresses the carbon in the air, but ignores the despair on the ground. The crossroads. The collapse of American coal was never just an economic failure. It was and continues to be a human one. It is the story of a nation that raced forward, chasing megawatts of change, and forgot the men who built its foundation. It's the story of a political system that became so obsessed with solving a technical problem, how to reduce carbon, that it failed to see it was dealing with a spiritual crisis. The leaders in Washington are trying to fix a broken industry. The people in Appalachia are trying to mend a broken identity. And these are two fundamentally different things. The policies of the green transition are built on a flawed premise. They are built on the idea that you can replace a lost culture with a government program, that you can trade a man's pride for a retraining certificate, that you can heal a spiritual wound with a financial incentive. But the soul of a community is not for sale. It cannot be bought with a subsidy or engineered with a new technology. It can only be honored. And that is where the current path is failing. It fails to honor the legacy of grit, community, and sacrifice that define this region. It fails to see these men as anything more than a problem to be solved, an obstacle on the path to a cleaner future. It treats their identity not as something to be respected, but as something to be replaced. And so, America finds itself at a national crossroad, a choice between the comfort of what was and the promise of what could be. A path that leads back to the black past, and a path that leads toward the green horizon. But perhaps that's the wrong way to look at it. Perhaps the real question is not about the future of energy. Perhaps it's about the future of empathy. The moral challenge facing the United States is not whether it has the courage to bury its last lump of coal. The moral question is, when we bury it, will we also bury the identity of the men who dug it up? Will we honor their sacrifice, or will we simply write them off as a cost of progress? If you are from one of these communities, what is the one thing politicians fail to understand about your identity? For those watching, do you believe a nation owes its industrial heartland a future? Or is this just the unavoidable, painful price of progress? But this promise to retrain miners for new industries, like carbon capture and green hydrogen, reveals a much bigger, multi-billion-dollar gamble. And in our next video, we will investigate the hard truth using the data from the Ohio River Valley Institute of whether this green revolution is actually a solution or just another political illusion.